James Rosen, thanks for joining us. Who are you and what do you do?
Great to be with you, John. I'm James Rosen. I'm the chief White House correspondent for Newsmax. I'm a longtime Washington reporter and the author of 4 books.
What do you like about being a reporter?
I like writing. I like telling stories. I like the creativity of it. I love the research aspects of it. And the great satisfaction for me is knowing that I have added reliably to the record of our times. I've had a chance to speak to a lot of young people in high school or college, many of whom have expressed an interest in going into journalism. And I asked them one by one, tell me why you want to be a reporter. And you'll get a variety of answers. And they'll range, but they usually fall into the same usual categories. And one response is, I want to help people. I want to help children. I want to speak truth to power. I want to be a voice for the voiceless, and so on. And I tell these folks, those are all very noble aspirations. None of them has anything to do with why good, honest reporters become a reporter. If you want to help people, you become a social worker. If you want to help children, you become a children's advocate. If you want to speak truth to power, you wouldn't be a reporter, you might aim to be a columnist. If you want to be a voice for the voiceless, you should be running for office. The only reason that good, honest reporters become reporters is because they suffer this peculiar compulsion to add to the record of our times. My wife is a normal person. She doesn't believe in the existence of the record. Okay. The 2 categories of people out there who tend to believe in the existence of the record are reporters and lawyers. Reporters are establishing the record in theory as a truth inquest. Lawyers are establishing a record because they're party to an adversarial proceeding in which they desired that their narrative should prevail with a jury or a judge. There's great similarities, but the greatest compliment ever paid to a reporter that I've ever heard was paid to my idol and someone I was privileged to get to know, Tom Wolfe, the great reporter and reporting-driven novelist. And on the back of one of his books, there was a blurb, I think from Newsweek, that said, no one has gotten more of his times down onto paper than Tom Wolfe. That's why we go into it, to create a more accurate record of our times.
Probably most people, young people you talk to, don't think about becoming reporters. They don't think about becoming journalists or going into the media, I'm going to guess. How did you decide to do it? Where were you in college and how did you break into this profession?
So I've had several missed callings, John. My first desire was to become a comic book illustrator. My parents persuaded me that it might be better for me to pursue a path in which I could actually support myself. So I was dissuaded from that. And then, I grew up watching Dan Rather, and, he was really good looking and he was, traveling the whole world and he was standing up to the president of the United States. And, there were only 3 channels back then. It's very important to understand the extraordinary changes in the media landscape since I was a young person. But I said, that's the job for me. And also I was influenced by reading Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. And I thought, that's the job for me, travel across country on somebody else's expense account and, have a bunch of fun on the way and just make sure you get all your notes and you interview the right people and you find them and you write up your story and it's genius and you go on to the next adventure. That was sort of the animating idea for me in becoming a reporter. I was very privileged to get to know Dan Rather. I'm still in touch with Dan Rather. It doesn't always stand me in good stead here in the College Fix or perhaps at Newsmax, but he was very gracious to me. But by the time I got into the business, by the time I became a working reporter in the mid-1990s, the whole industry was so different from what I had grown up admiring and wanting to be like. And it's not to say that I didn't have an opportunity to engage the original impulses that sent me on a path toward journalism, but it was a very different business, and now it's a very different business still, just from the mid-1990s when I started.
You're a writer, but most people probably know you from television as a television news reporter. How important is writing to the work of journalism?
So, it is journalism. You're not going to commit any journalism if you can't write or if you're averse to writing. But there's different kinds of writing. And so there's TV writing, TV news writing, which is very different from print writing or the kind of writing I do where I write books on nonfiction subjects at great length. In one previous role, in a couple of different places actually, local news, and in my prior years at Fox News where I spent 19 years, I would have people tell me from time to time, they really didn't want me speaking in full sentences. They wanted me to speak in a sort of broken series of emissions of some kind like this. The president, making it clear, he's not happy. And then to go to the soundbite that would show George W. saying, I'm pissed, okay, or whatever, all right? And, or I would be told I would say something like, the trip was conducted under the aegis of the U.S. Navy's Reconnaissance Department, whatever, something like that. And they say, aegis? You can't use a word like that on TV. And I have always believed that underestimates the intelligence of our viewership, regardless of which viewers you're talking about or which organization's viewers. The great American people out there, they get it. And if there's a specific word they might not know, they get it from context. And I've always believed that you could speak the King's English on television news and do just fine. And I think my career attests to that. But I've always enjoyed writing for print at the same time I was pursuing a TV career, because the TV writing, even if you're doing it in complete sentences, is very simple. The use of lengthy constructs or clauses or subjunctives and that sort of thing, it can be done, but it's got to be done sparingly. Whereas the kind of writing you do for print or for long-form nonfiction really allows you to flex your muscles, to keep your muscles, and to make sure you remember how to write for a literate audience and not just an eyeball audience.
I've always enjoyed the fact that you are a book author in addition to a television daily reporter, and you've written great books on John Mitchell, the Nixon administration's attorney general. Also, you're working on a project involving Justice Scalia. You have one volume of a 2-volume biography already published. You did a great volume on Bill Buckley, collecting some of his works and so forth. Why do you bother doing that? What is the point of writing a book in this day and age? What compels you to do it? Why do you do it? Do people read these? Why write books?
The death of books, actual hard paper copy books, has been greatly exaggerated over the decades. So if the question is, why do you do it? Because it's a dying medium, its death has been rather slow. And maybe there's more to this than people imagine. In terms of why do you write them, it's because these are stories that need to be told, and they need to be told at this length, and they need to be told only the way that James Rosen would do them, I'm afraid. So, for example, John Mitchell was the attorney general who went to prison for his role in the Watergate cover-up. I spent 17 years on that book. It was always a part-time thing. If I had any idea it was going to take me 17 years when I embarked on it when I was 23 in 1991, that, Jimmy boy, you're not going to finish this for 17 years until you're 40 in 2008, okay? I probably would have just said, forget it, I'll enjoy my Saturdays instead, But again, it's a compulsion. It is a compulsion to complete the record, in a sense, and establish an accurate record. And that's why I write those books. And so, for example, on the Scalia biography, as you mentioned, I'm completing the second and final installment of a 2-volume biography of him. The first biography was published last year, and it's 500 pages. And it ends with Scalia taking his seat on the Supreme Court. He had a really fascinating career in government and academia and the law prior to becoming a justice. There were 2 existing biographies of him. Both were published while Scalia was alive. He cooperated with one of them extensively, he and his family, not at all with the other. And both of them turned out pretty much in the same place, which was open in their contempt for Justice Scalia and his conduct and his philosophy and his jurisprudence and his legacy. So I like to say that my book, which is the first to be published after his death, and therefore has great access to materials that were either overlooked, suppressed, or given short shrift by the previous hostile authors. Mine is also the first that is an admiring biography of the man, or as I like to say, the first written by an author who has his head screwed on straight. And so, again, the story had been told, but it had been told poorly, even tendentiously. And so it's not just about adding to the record of our times, it's about making sure the record is accurate. That's the compulsion.
Here we are at the Watergate complex, a notable location in the history of politics in Washington, D.C., and indeed America. You wrote a book of John Mitchell, whose life changed because of an event that took place here. He also lived here. So we've not chosen this setting at random to do this interview, but isn't it exciting to be in this place, to be around this stuff here in Washington, D.C.? Give us a sense of the excitement you get from being physically present here in our capital city.
I live in the Capitol. My kids have attended public schools here in the Capitol. I've been here since 1999. I have spent a lot of time covering the White House or the State Department over those years, and I'm presently covering the White House. So I'm there every day. And every single time, John, that I walk up the North Lawn driveway, because reporters may only access through the Northwest Gate near 17th and Pennsylvania. Every time I've cleared Secret Service and I'm walking up that driveway and I'm looking at the building, I wouldn't say that I'm overwhelmed by these voices to the point of incapacitation, but I do hear the voices of history, and they sound like the tape recordings from the various Cold War presidents. Like, well, I agree with you, Mr. President, that we cannot allow the Cubans to, et cetera, right? And God damn it, Bob, we got to make sure, awfully goddamn sure that, and just listening to, that history kind of overwhelms me when I walk up that every day. And I've been at this since 1999. And I, despite the evident neurosis on display, regard this as healthy because if you're not feeling in some internalized way the historicity of all of this, then you're not in the right business anymore. And you ought to get out and make sure that your slot can be allotted to somebody who does care about the history, about the record of our times, and is awed suitably by these settings.
What do you do on that job then? You're the White House correspondent. You're walking up that driveway, and when you're not thinking about all the voices of history, when you're thinking about the job I've got to do,
right.
What actually is your daily job like? What do you do there?
I tend to have a morning report for Newsmax's morning show, national report, right at the top of the 9 a.m. hour. So that means I'm up at around 5:30, getting a sense of what the available elements are. For TV, you need two things, sound and pictures. If you're a print reporter, you just need the sound in a sense, right? You could stay at your desk and you could write a brilliant piece. But for TV, we need the sound. I mean, you could stay at your desk in TV too, but we need pictures, moving pictures, and we need a sound, which is not just audio, but video of someone talking about the subject matter. And so by 7-ish, I will have sent a producer the rundown of the elements I want for that 9 a.m. hit. And so it might look like this, like take POTUS Zelensky VO, right? And I will give instructions for what the chyron should read, which is the little printed text that appears on screen beneath somebody's face when they're speaking, or in the upper left corner, or what have you, to identify the scene and the date. And then it'll say, take POTUS SOT, sound on tape. And I will have identified in a given video link somewhere or file the time markers and the transcript, the text of the president's comments that I want. Then it might say, take Rosen on cam. And then it might say, take POTUS SOT number 2. And in between the two sound bites is me teeing up the second one, that sort of thing. And there's, it's a fairly limited menu of possibilities, but, and then, I will keep doing those live reports throughout the day, updating them based on what's happened, well, we don't need to do Zelensky anymore. That's yesterday's story. We need to do today, the president spoke before this group, or the vice president's going here. Once President Biden abdicated in the 2024 contest and Vice President Harris claimed the top of the ticket, it kind of expanded the workload of most White House correspondents, because theretofore, Vice President Harris was somebody whose activities we really didn't need to cover too closely or worry too much about. Now you got to worry about them both, and you're accountable for covering them both. But that's a typical day.
Are you merely transcribing what they're doing and what's happening, or are you offering more for your viewers?
I didn't mention this as a feature of a typical day at the White House, the White House briefing, which is a very important part of it, where there's 49 chairs in the White House press briefing room, We're all familiar with what that room looks like. Everyone who comes to visit me there is surprised at how small and grimy the place is. But still a great privilege to be there. And that's where the reporters are asking questions of the White House press secretary or guest briefers who've been brought in, say the retired Rear Admiral John Kirby, the spokesman for the National Security Council, or yesterday they had the administrator of FEMA because of current hurricane season. This will all be terribly outdated by the time it airs, etc. You notice how good I've been about avoiding these dating references. So no, you are not simply a stenographer. The material that comes out of the White House, whether in email form or on their website or social media platforms, or through the interactions of the White House press briefing, or through the spoken remarks of the president or the vice president or whomever, the administration, taking that down and transcribing it accurately is important. It's part of the job. But obviously, the good reporter will take whatever is coming from whatever White House and stack it up against other known facts, claims, assertions, etc., to give a fuller picture of whatever the subject matter is for the day.
And what's the purpose of that? Where do you feel you fit in terms of telling a story? What is the value of doing that?
Again, we are adding to the record of our times. If somebody 10 minutes from now or 100 years from now wants to know what was it like in the Biden era, they will have my reporting and that of my colleagues to look back on.
But you're not just writing for you're not working for the future historians. You are working for people right now, aren't you?
That's true, the audience. But my working assumption has always been that if you satisfy the imperatives of the historical record, you'll do a very good job for the contemporary viewer or reader or listener. Now, I started covering the Biden White House in January 2022, so almost a year into the term. And President Biden gave a news conference in the East Room of the White House, January 19, 2022, the eve of his first anniversary in office. And it was a fairly typical Joe Biden press conference, or latter Joe Biden press conference, in the sense that he had a list of the reporters in front of him of about 10 names on it, pre-selected by his aides. He was going fumblingly through the list, mispronouncing the names of the reporters and asking who's next. And the thing had gone about an hour, which is the standard length, and he had made it through the pre-approved list. But at that point, in a sign of the distemper of our times, a number of reporters, this one included, were just outright clamoring to be called on, and not very happy with the idea of being used as human props, which we had been, So in an extraordinary moment, President Biden does something that is very generous, maybe not that astute. And he decides, okay, I'll tell you what, how long do y'all want to stay here? And when the clamoring begins again, and he's looking at his watch, he says, all right, I'll tell you what, I'll spend another hour here and we'll get one question from every single reporter here, which he did, okay? There were portions of the news conference that followed that moment that were inadvisable for him, okay? But he called on me. And we were still obligated to wear masks at that time. But this is online, and you can find this online. I said, Mr. President, thank you. James Rosen with Newsmax. And if you look at the video, you can see him look off to an aide as if to say, who the hell let this happen? But I said, I'd like to raise a delicate subject with you, Mr. President, with utmost respect for your life accomplishments and the high office you hold. I said, a poll was released this morning by Politico Morning Consult, which found 46% of registered voters disagreeing with the statement, Joe Biden is mentally fit. And he starts to chuckle. I said, not even a Democratic majority was willing strongly to affirm this statement, only 43%. Well, I'll leave it to you to decide if they're right. And I said, Mr. President, if you allow me to finish. My question for you, sir, is why do you suppose such large segments of the American electorate have come to harbor such profound concerns about your cognitive fitness? Thank you. Now, I always knew he wasn't going to spend a whole lot of time on that enemy terrain, but his answer was really extraordinary. He just looked at me blankly and said, I have no idea, and pointed at the next person. And to some observers, that answer validated the question, because when a man tells you, I have no idea, he is in a sense speaking to a mind that is empty. I was made to feel by my White House press corps colleagues, and I've been a member in good standing of the White House Correspondents Association on and off for 25 years. I was made to feel by my colleagues at the White House that I had been rude, that I had descended to fringy territory. And the Biden press operation, in the person of the press secretary at that time, Jen Psaki, whom I knew for many years, and then in the person of her successor, Karine Jean-Pierre, blackballed me for the next 8 months. I was not called on in a single briefing. No, I was not invited to join background briefings. I was not called on in the telephone backgrounders, etc. Complete blackout for 8 months for asking that question. Lo and behold, 2+ years later, Mr. Biden withdraws from the 2024 contest for pretty much these very concerns. And, you know, there were those who recognized that I had asked that question 2+ years before it became fashionable to do so. But I'm proud of that, because just with a simple question, I was able to help establish the record of our times. And in retrospect, this became the defining issue of his presidency.
That's a great story about Joe Biden. Of course, when you're a reporter, sometimes you have an adversarial kind of relationship with whoever you're talking to at a press conference, trying to extract information. But are you taking sides? Are you trying to get Joe Biden, or would you do this to any politician?
No, absolutely. I took the registration of independent when I came to Washington in 1999, so I'm a registered independent. You know, I don't believe that that reporters need to go to absurd lengths to demonstrate their independence. You know, I think who was the Jim Lehrer used to say that he didn't vote for that reason, because I'm a reporter. I think that's preposterous. You know, should your kid not play Little League? How far do you take it, right? You know, like the civic forms of participation. But, you know, one of the gratifications of being a reporter is that you get to train your wits and maybe even a dash of malevolence on everybody equally. And so, you know, we just talked about an important question that I got to pose to President Biden not long thereafter, in March of 2023. I was invited, one of 10 reporters, to participate in a news conference with former President Trump at CPAC, the conservative gathering in suburban Washington. And, you know, reporters do play an adversarial role often. It's adversarial insofar as public figures don't like being held accountable at all. But it doesn't have to be nasty. And my experience is that when you ask a question in a certain way, you can accomplish the adversarial imperative while probably getting a better answer out of the respondent, because you haven't seemed so adversarial. And so this experience with Donald Trump was like that. When he called on me, I said, James Rosen with Newsmax, and he kind of nodded in recognition and sort of with a wave of the head that said to me, oh, yes, I know of you. You and I are cultured men, the two of us. Go ahead. And I said, Mr. President, this campaign for the presidency, your third, obviously unfolds against a very different backdrop than those which attended your first two runs for the presidency, insofar as we have the presence of these 4 pending criminal investigations that are underway. And I know that you regard those investigations as politically motivated witch hunts. Nonetheless, I said, we are given to understanding that one or more of these cases may soon reach a point of disposition that could involve the handing down of charges. So I wonder if you would take this opportunity here at CPAC to assure your donors and your supporters that you'll stay in this race regardless of what happens in those investigations, even if you're indicted 1 or more times. And Trump was Trump. He divested of himself 35 seconds. That didn't quite answer the question. Well, this is the most horrible thing. You've never seen anything so horrible. And it went on like that. And when I finally sensed a moment where I could practice what I call the art of interjection, I said, so you'll stay in the race? He said, oh, absolutely. I wouldn't even think of leaving. He said, he went on a little bit longer, and then he said, it'll probably only enhance my numbers. And he turned out to be very prescient in all of that. But it made global news. Trump vows to stay in race if indicted. Now, on my way out of the National Harbor, where that event was held, I ran into some of the former president's aides, and they made it clear they didn't like the question. I said, we made news. He said, yeah, no, but I know you made news, they said to me, but you could have asked about anything. I said, what should I have asked about? They said, well, you could ask about his views on Ukraine or energy or any number of things. I said, we know his views on those things. We didn't know this. And guess what? I said, his supporters are very grateful to hear that from him. And they were. And it played out as the former president envisioned. It did help his poll numbers. But again, I raise all of this simply by way of emphasizing that a good reporter, an honest reporter, is going to find a way to ask tough questions, a polite way, perhaps, a respectful way, but an effective way to ask tough questions of both sides.
So, James, you try to be polite and ask good questions, but you have gotten sideways with administrations previously, and you have an amazing story when you were just trying to be a good reporter, get information to the public, in which you were, well, tell us what happened.
So in the early 2000s, I was covering the State Department for Fox News, and that's a wonderful beat. There's a lot of travel. I've been to 53 countries. Sometimes these are trips where you're flying with the Secretary of State or the Vice President or the President or the Secretary of Defense, and you're hitting 10 countries in 8 days. And so, as I like to say, I've been to a million places I'd actually love to see sometime. But I developed some good sources, and I started doing some extensive, exclusive reporting on North Korea, which as a subject always fascinated me because of the fascist nature of the government there, and the aggressive foreign policy, and the sprint toward nuclear weapons. There's a lot to chew on there. And I did some exclusive reporting at the time about both North Korea's nuclear weapons program and also its succession plan that was designed to install the man in power who is now in power there, Kim Jong-un. So, for example, I reported from the State Department that if the United States and its allies at the UN Security Council sought to impose fresh sanctions on North Korea for detonating a second nuclear device, North Korea's range of responses would include the following steps. I also reported that U.S. intelligence had, through the use of signals intelligence, obtained talking points excuse me, that were being distributed through North Korea's UN mission to all of its diplomats around the world. And these talking points were all about how great Kim Jong-un, the next leader, was in all of his different facets of humanity. And these diplomats were expected to memorize and internalize these talking points as gospel. And that was some of the reporting I did at that time. Unbeknownst to me at that time, the Obama administration launched a national security leak investigation to determine the sources for my reporting, and rifled through the office of a State Department official while he wasn't there, and took a number of steps that I was unaware of at the time. And one of the steps that was taken was the FBI filled out a search warrant application before a federal judge. So an FBI agent basically swore under oath in an affidavit that he's an FBI agent of such and such years experience, that he has experience in these kinds of cases and so forth, that we're investigating James Rosen and his reporting for Fox News. And that document designated me a co-conspirator in a criminal violation of the Espionage Act of 1917. And that was the first time that that designation had ever been applied to a working reporter by the United States government. All of this surfaced when the Washington Post broke it in May of 2013. And that's how I learned about a lot of this stuff myself. In short order, it was disclosed that the Attorney General at the time, Eric Holder, had personally approved this novel designation of a working reporter as a criminal co-conspirator for doing his job. It was made clear that the Attorney General approved this historic step. It was made clear that there was no intent to prosecute me. The individual who was identified to be my source was indeed prosecuted, and to spare himself the debilitating costs of a trial, pleaded guilty in open court to providing national defense information to James Rosen of Fox News. I've never confirmed or denied that that person was my source because I don't think that's an appropriate business for reporters. And that individual served time in prison. But once it became clear the administration had no intention of prosecuting me, then it made their designation of me and the search warrants that they undertook of me all the more illegal in nature. And this was attested to even by the likes of Floyd Abrams, who had been the attorney who represented the New York Times in the Pentagon Papers case. To give you an example of how significant this was, not even the Nixon administration designated Neil Sheehan a criminal co-conspirator in a violation of the Espionage Act. And Neil Sheehan was the reporter who, in 1971, published the Pentagon Papers for the New York Times, 7,000 pages of classified documents. There's a lot more to this, including perjury by the Attorney General, a speech by President Obama in which he expressed regrets about all of this. Ultimately, procedural reforms were enacted. But what was revealed that I think that was most shocking to people was that as part of that process of getting that search warrant application approved by a federal judge, they then they asked that the document itself, the fact that they had obtained a search warrant against me, should be held secret for 18 months. The judge said no. So they went to a second judge, and that judge said no. And they went to a third judge. This is known as judge shopping. And the third judge said yes. And so this stuff was kept secret from me and from everyone else for 18 months, except it wasn't. It was held secret for 36 months. And that's when the Washington Post finally learned about it all. The only apology I ever received from anybody in all of this was from the chief judge of the federal district court at the time, who apologized that this had been held secret 18 months longer than it was supposed to be. But what did they do with their surveillance powers? They accessed the phone records for about 20 phone lines associated with me. My cell phone, my home phone, my State Department booth phones, the White House booth phones for Fox News, which I'd use from time to time, or the Pentagon booth phones. All of these are on the list. And then the home phone line of my parents, who were in their late 60s at that point, living in Staten Island. And this was just seen widely when it was finally disclosed as a very egregious abuse of government power. There was more. The Obama administration deep-sixed the video of me asking Jen Psaki questions about the Iran nuclear deal from the official State Department page, where they're supposed to keep the official State Department videos of the official State Department press briefings. And an 8-minute segment between Jen Psaki and me, where she basically admitted that the Obama administration had lied to the American people about the origins of the Iran nuclear talks, was deleted and replaced with a white flash. 2 investigations at the State Department, procedural reforms enacted. So, John, there are only so many boxes that the state can check off on the menu of repressive actions that can be taken against an individual reporter. There's censorship, there's surveillance. I suppose I should consider myself lucky that I'm just here talking to you still.
That sounds frustrating. It sounds even maybe like a reason not to become a journalist. Why put up with this? Or paradoxically, does this affirm in your mind this is what you want to be doing?
When you or your reporting become the subject of government surveillance, it's kind of like a very easy way to know that you did your job well. It's kind of a badge of honor for the few journalists among us here in Washington who can say something like that your exclusive reporting was deemed such a threat by the regime that they started to investigate you. Here's another story, okay? So in 2018, I was between jobs, and I got a call from an Israeli reporter who I'd never heard of in my life. And he said, James Rosen, this is Amichai Stein from Israel Public Radio, and listen, would like to interview you. And at the same time, now I'm seeing that I'm getting all these emails and text messages from other Israeli reporters and from former colleagues of mine who are stationed in Israel who say, hey, this person's looking to get in touch with you. Can I give them your number? And suddenly I was an object of intense media focus in Israel. Okay. What was it about? The Netanyahu administration, that iteration of the Netanyahu administration, released a large body of documents, official documents that had been sealed, classified in Israel, that included videotapes, documents, all kinds of materials. And they related to a very important event of this century, which was the Israeli airstrike in 2007 that destroyed a nuclear reactor that had been built in the deserts of Syria with assistance from North Korea. And I remember covering it at the time, and I remember thinking that it was a very important story because it brings together so much of our times. And in fact, one of my books is a collection of transcripts of interviews I did with Vice President Cheney. And I led off the book describing his role in that airstrike, where he wanted the United States to conduct that airstrike. And the Bush administration at that time, Condoleezza Rice, they were all sort of gun shy from Iraq. And they said no. And they said, let's take it to the UN Security Council. And Cheney said, the Israelis are never going to let this go to the UNSC. So the Israelis took out the reactor, one of the great intelligence operations and military operations of our century. This volume of materials that was released in 2018 by the Netanyahu administration included documents that indicated that a reporter from Fox News in Washington named James Rosen had placed a query to the Israeli embassy in Washington about this forthcoming strike. And because of James Rosen's inquiry, the Israeli Defense Forces decided to launch that operation, striking that nuclear reactor 2 weeks sooner than they had planned. And now I'm on the phone with Amichai Stein of Israel Public Radio, and he's telling me, you are a hero in Israel. We would like to do an interview with you. So I met him, I put on a coat and tie, and I met Amichai Stein near the Washington Zoo on this corner, and we did an interview. And he was sending me links to Israeli programs that look like Israeli CNN, pretty much, where it's all in Hebrew that's indecipherable to me, despite a bar mitzvah of many decades ago. And, the sort of complex language and pausing to say James Rosen of Fox News and people nodding solemnly like they seem to know who the hell I am. That was quite strange. And one of the other aspects of the disclosure was that it suggested that my source that caused me to ask that question was the director of the Mossad. Now, that wasn't true, okay? But I was being asked, how does it feel to be a hero? And I said, look, the heroes here were the Israeli operatives who first discovered that reactor and got inside of it and took pictures and sent it to Dick Cheney and the United States, and the pilots who conducted that mission. Those are heroes. I'm just a reporter, But it's nice to be recognized for one's work.
I can't imagine someone wanting to do something different professionally from working in journalism and telling the news of our time. What's the case for a young person entering the profession today? If a 20-year-old or 19-year-old comes to you and asks for career advice, why should I go into journalism? Why should I go into the media? What would you say to that young person?
I have a hard time, honestly, imagining the entreaty coming quite that way. I'm thinking about journalism, maybe, right? Not why should I do this or why, but my son is 17, and I think he has the makings of a really good reporter. And I'm not sure that I want to advise him to do it, honestly, only because of the economics of the industry, which are shifting right now and going in places where nobody can tell you accurately that they really understand. And the influence of AI is going to be profound in that as in all other areas. But I think my son would be a good reporter because he's got a strong BS detector. He likes telling stories when he comes back from somebody's house. He does impersonations of the different people and he tells us what was said and how things unfolded. So he's good at it. He's good at the basic business of a reporter, which is to tell stories, get it right, capture people's voices, develop your own voice, and have that nose for news. So I would say journalism is the right line of work for you if you are somebody who likes seeing the world, likes interacting with people, likes hearing people tell their stories, likes taking disparate facts and trends and quotes and forming them into a coherent narrative. And it's one thing to create the record of our times and to do it accurately. But if you don't do it in some entertaining and digestible way, no one's going to come back and read day 2 of you. So you have to have a certain artistic flair for it too, you know. The best piece of writing is the one that produces in the reader the precise reaction that the writer hoped the reader would have, but without using those words, without clobbering the person over the head. You want to lead them to a conclusion and they have the right conclusion, but you don't want to say it for them. And that's part of the craft. So it's for you if you like writing, if you like being creative, if you like finding out facts, new things, new people, new cultures, new foods. Can you get rich off of it? Some have. Can you earn a good living off of it? Yes.
One more question. This is the public service announcement portion of our show at the College Fix, which is, you saw the Dow journalism program at Hillsdale College up close. This is the Dow journalism program for the rest of America, right? This is my attempt to get some good kids thinking about this professionally. How can we bring more talent into what we do in journalism? And so we have a news website where we try and break news every day. But the other thing we're trying to do is identify this talent and bring them in and train them up and encourage them and find young people who are interested in trying out journalism. We'll work with them. Our editors, our professional editors, they're real journalists, are coaches and mentors as much as they are editors, really, and trying to bring them in, get a taste of it working for the website. Then we'll do for the most interested and talented, we'll invest further with them for summer internships or fellowships after they graduate and that sort of thing, and then do career counseling later on. We've had a pretty good track record now, doing it for 15 years of bringing some folks in. But I'll invite you to suggest: is this a good way? Working with the College Fix, is that a good way for a young person to explore a career in the media?
If you're interested in journalism and you think it might be the right line of work for you, chances are you're right, because you're a perceptive person and you already knew this and you just need some encouragement. The College Fix is the place for you, because here you will learn the basics of the craft, but also how you organize your life to make this your life's calling. You will process information differently once you are a reporter, and that'll help you in all facets of your life. And so I would encourage everybody to take a look at the College Fix and see if it's the right program for you. Chances are, if you're interested in journalism, it will be.
James Rosen, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Hello again, John Miller here. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button, leave a comment, subscribe. Also, visit our website at The College Fix. If you're a student and you'd like to join The College Fix and try out journalism, find the button on our homepage and an editor will contact you. We got more videos coming. Please stay tuned.